So we all know the story of Frankenstein, right?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Well, there's a lot more to it than that. So I recently read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Picked this up for $1.99 at my local Goodwill store. Very underrated place to buy books, by the way, Goodwill. And then I watched the 1994 Kenneth Branagh movie, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So we're gonna see how these two compare to each other, how they're different, how they're similar, and which one I like better. Okay, first of all, the book, Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley. It was published in 1818. I believe Mary Shelley wrote this book when she was just 19 years old, which is incredible. It tells the tale of Victor Frankenstein, a young, aspiring scientist in Switzerland in the 18th century. By the way, we are going to get into some spoilers, some plot points, both in the book and in the movie, so if you want to read the book or haven't seen the movie and you don't want anything spoiled, go read the book or go watch the movie, then come back and watch this video. This book is dark. It is really dark. There's a lot of death and a lot of murder. Ruthless murder of children and of women. I would say the major theme of Frankenstein is the dangers of pursuing knowledge. It really asks the question, just because we can, should we? Because as Victor Frankenstein finds out, he shouldn't have. So we learn a little bit about Victor Frankenstein, his childhood, growing up with an adopted sister named Elizabeth that he eventually falls in love with. A little bit weird, but they weren't blood related, so it's okay. He goes off to university to study, and he just kind of really quickly never explains how, the details of how he learns how to animate life from a deceased subject, but he just kind of says, yeah, I just discovered how to do it. I'm not going to bother you with the details because it's really important that nobody knows how to do this anyway because it created a monster. So eventually Frankenstein creates his monster and is immediately horrified by what he has done. He describes just how hideous this creature is, and he was obsessed with making this happen for years. Obsessing over his studies, learning how to create this monster, and almost as soon as this thing comes to life, it's like a light bulb goes off in Frankenstein's head, and he just is like, what have I done? This is a hideous monster. I can't even look at it. I have to leave the room, and he forgets about this thing, and it eventually escapes. I'm not going to explain the entire plot to you, but one thing that really stuck out in this book is the level of depth given to the creature itself. You really start to empathize with this monster, and it is a monster. It does some pretty up shit. He learns to speak and read, and he learns this through observing a small family that he grows to fall in love with. And it's like a little child, kind of. And then he works up the courage to introduce himself to one of the members of the family, and things do not go the way that he was hoping they would go. And you feel really sorry for this creature because you're kind of going on this journey with him, and you're learning he tells you his inner thoughts about how he feels, this love he feels. He does some acts of kindness for this family, and it is not returned. And he's devastated, and then he just goes on an evil rampage. Overall, I found the book very entertaining, very engaging, and I really enjoyed it. And it was a lot different than a lot of the kind of pop culture incarnations of Frankenstein that we've seen over the years. Of course, the 1931 Boris Karloff movie is kind of where you get that original image of the flat-headed Frankenstein with kind of greenish skin and the bolts sticking out of his neck. None of that's in the book. The creature is like 8 feet tall, so he's tall, but there's never any description of a flat head or bolts in the neck. That was all, I think, created in the 1931 movie. But the movie we're going to be talking about in this video is the 1994 Kenneth Branagh movie, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is the closest thing to the book as far as movies are concerned. If I'm wrong, if there's a better movie version of the book out there closer to the book, comment below. First things first, it's got a great cast. Kenneth Branagh as Victor Frankenstein, he's a great actor. Helena Bonham Carter as Elizabeth, she's great. And then Robert De Niro plays the monster. I thought he was actually pretty darn good as the monster in this movie. He's very understated. He doesn't do the typical Robert De Niro type stuff. He's got some good makeup, a lot of stitches across the face. In the book, though, Frankenstein is 8 feet tall. And Robert De Niro in this movie is about the same height as Kenneth Branagh, so he's just not as menacing as you would picture the creature in the book. This movie is extremely fast-paced. You don't get any breathing time to kind of connect with the main characters. They don't really take a lot of time to delve into any kind of character development, so you don't really care much for your main character, Victor Frankenstein, as you do in the book. And while you do learn about this character's history and you see some traumatic things happen to him along the way, you just don't really get any time to kind of relax and reflect, and everything just moves so quickly. You don't even really get to see how he is digesting these things that have happened to him. So you don't really connect with Kenneth Branagh's character as closely as I would have liked to. This movie also really heavily relies on music. It's a little much sometimes. There's also heavy use of this circular camera movement where the camera is just walking around the subjects in multiple scenes. I don't know if that's a Kenneth Branagh direction thing. I haven't seen a ton of his movies. But I thought it was a little overused, and this is before, the steady cams and everything, so some of the shots are kind of shaky, and it's almost nauseating sometimes. I thought they just used it a little too much. I don't think you get as much insight into the monster in the movie as you do in the book. There are some good moments with Robert De Niro's creature in the movie. You do feel for him a few times, but not nearly to the level that you feel for him in the book. One moment in the movie that I had a problem with is the part where the creature first comes alive and Victor Frankenstein realizes that he made a mistake. Because in the movie, there's this really awkward scene where Frankenstein and the monster are just kind of rolling around, slipping in the slimy water, and he's trying to get the monster to stand up on its 2 feet for the first time. That goes on for a little too long. And anyway, and then he eventually gets the monster up on some chains and just kind of out of nowhere realizes what he's done. And he even says, "What have I done? What have I done?" a couple times. The book just does a much better job kind of putting you in the head of Victor Frankenstein as he beholds this creature and just realizes how hideously ugly it is, and that it is an abomination, and there's no way that anyone would ever accept this thing in society, and he is horrified by it. It scares the hell out of him. He can't even look at it, and he has to leave the room almost immediately. The movie, he's just kind of looking at it, and all of a sudden he's like, "What have I done? What have I done?" It just didn't work. Okay, the biggest change that they make in this movie is there's a point in the book, and this is the same in the movie, where the creature has a request from Frankenstein, and that is he wants a partner. He wants Victor to make him a female creature so that he can have somebody to talk to and just live life with, because he's so lonely, because no human beings will accept him. And in the book, Victor, he never goes through with it in the book. He does in the movie. There's a gruesome scene in the movie that is also not in the book, where the creature pays Victor a visit on his wedding night. I'll just say that. And in the movie, this is where the movie just kind of lost me. He takes his bride and brings her back to life like immediately in the same night. It's kind of weird. And there's a strange scene where Frankenstein and the monster are trying to get the bride of Frankenstein to come to them, and it's like they're calling her like a dog, and just none of that is in the book, and didn't love it, although it was a bold choice, and it does take the story in a much more dramatic direction than the book did. But overall, I will say the movie was just much too fast-paced, and you never really connect with the main characters like you do in the book. So I'll say the book is overall much better than the movie version, the 1994 Kenneth Branagh version. I'm sure a lot of you out there will say, oh, the book's always better. Not so, and you might see some examples of that in some future videos. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. See you later.